Hey, and welcome to this LinkedIn Learning Live Office Hours. Today we'll talk about how to stop AI Workslop and augment human skills with AI. And I'm joined by Angela Wick, fellow LinkedIn Learning instructor. Hey, Angela, thanks so much for joining.
Hi, thanks, Andreas. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Hey, folks, for those of you in the audience, maybe you're part of the 40% of professionals who've recently received information from your peers, from other business partners, and you started reading it and you thought, well, actually, that, yeah, it's okay, but it's not great, right? We need to fix this. We need to make this better. And that's called Workslop. In a recent study by BetterUp, more than 40% of participants said, hey, I've received that kind of bad and incomplete information over the last month, and I need to spend time to fix it. And that gets really, really annoying because, hey, wasn't AI supposed to be the big productivity booster? So why do I need to fix my peers' work now? This is what we'll talk about today, but not just in the context of any work. I've asked Angela if she'd like to join because she's obviously created a lot of great material in courses for business analysts, and she's deeply involved in that space. But maybe, Angela, if I toss it over to you, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. Angela Wick here. I'm a LinkedIn Learning instructor focusing on business analysis, product ownership, and what AI and business analysis do when they come together. So, business analysis for artificial intelligence projects and what analysis needs to happen.
Fantastic. When I talk to business leaders, when I talk to CEOs, CIOs, there's always this push of we need to do more AI. Yeah, that's great. Yes, we should use it more. We should make it a new normal, but it's not just done if you just give everybody Copilot or everybody ChatGPT. Because what happens then is a lot of times people are left to their own devices trying to figure out how do I use this. And a lot of times it ends up being used like a Google search. Ask a question, get an answer. Ask another question, get another answer. But they're not really tapping into this potential. So that's why you end up with half-baked drafts, like the first version of a report that you should take a look at. And the like. But if you're a manager, right, that grows exponential. Your team members send you that sort of information, unless you really interject. So, Angela, I'm curious. What are you seeing there? What's your definition of AI slop or work slop? It's a pretty new term.
Yeah, it is a new term. Last couple of weeks, I think I saw it. It's funny because I always say that our leaders want projects done faster. That's what we think they want, but they really don't want the project done faster. They want results and outcomes faster. And so I think AI slop comes into this. So no matter it's AI or not, we tend to think speed is what we're being motivated by. We tend to think that's all our leaders want, just speed, speed, speed. But yet, when we sit back and talk to leaders, no, they want relevance, they want impact, they want outcomes and results. And so I think it's up to all of us to sit back and take a step and think, wait a second, I have to figure out how to balance the two. How do we get speed and relevance and impact? And AI slop is so easy. Like, Andreas, I don't know if you're paying attention to this like I am when you're using AI, but there's this self awareness happening in myself about what's happening in my brain and how tempting it is. Do you resonate with this? Like,
Absolutely. I mean, on one hand, it is super easy to use it for your productivity tasks. Send an email, write a status, summarize meeting minutes. But then also when you write something yourself, what I've noticed is I second guess myself. Is this really how you should say it? Is this the proper way to say it, or am I sounding like a large language model? You see these structures. It's not this, it's that. Or
I find myself having to get up and walk around, come back and read something to edit it,
yeah.
because it's really easy to get drawn into the way the language is being put together. Because in some ways, like sentence by sentence, it's like, dang, that's structured well. I love that. Oh, what a great word to put in there. But then I'm not looking at the actual story I'm trying to tell. What am I actually trying to communicate? Now, extrapolate this, Andreas, into an enterprise agentic world and embedding AI outputs into a process. This just blows my mind what AI slop could do from an enterprise process perspective if we don't figure this out in our own productivity in our own selves. How would we manage the observability, traceability, evaluations, and quality when we embed it into a business process.
Yeah, and right, layer on top of that, that at the end of the day, it's your customer or your business partner that is receiving that output, and
Mhm.
they're doing business with you, with your business. They're paying you money for this, or a commission, but they're getting subpar output and subpar results, and that's not acceptable. It doesn't matter if you created that with AI, if you created it yourself, or if you created it together with a team in your company. Bad quality remains bad quality. It doesn't matter how it was generated.
Yeah, I find myself like dealing with it in terms of whether you call it micro tasking or micro prompting. Like the way I find myself dealing with it, which also ties into agentic enterprise AI analysis, is really thinking at the micro level. So I don't want AI to write 100 words even for me. I'm like at sentence by sentence level
Hmm.
because I own the intent.
Yeah.
I own the story that's being told and the order that's happening, right? I own how the data is being analyzed.
Hmm.
I feel like it's too easy to ask AI to do too large of a task, whether that be data analysis, image creation. It's like when we're frustrated with it, I always have to think I got to
Yeah,
niche
and
down. And that's the same with agents too when we do agentic AI.
I think that's such an important point because recently there were also some stories in the news, and maybe you've seen this as well if you're watching this. For example, in Australia, a professional services company, Deloitte, created a report for the Australian government that
Yeah.
was littered with sources that didn't exist, right? So
Yeah.
AI was clearly used, and Deloitte confirmed that it had been used in the process. And the AI tool made up sources that don't exist. Now we know that this can happen, right? There are hallucinations where these models create plausible sounding information that's factually incorrect. But
Mhm.
if it's a 440 million Australian dollars or 290 million US dollars project, that kind of AI sloppiness, right, has a whole different weight. And especially if there are lawmakers basing their decisions off of that.
Yeah.
To me, that's one big example. We've seen this previously with lawyers, right? Already in 2023, there were the ChatGPT lawyers in New York City who used it to look for precedents, submitted information to court. The court found the sources don't exist, find the lawyers, and so on. So to me, that part is if it is something that you create that is in your name, and somebody either expects that it's your thoughts, it's your expertise, or they even pay you money for it, you better make sure that at a minimum you check the information, you check the facts, or better yet, use AI to augment what you're doing. Maybe brainstorm, maybe yes, ask it for sources. I mean, there are great tools out there like Perplexity or others that show you
Yeah.
the sources, but always double check. Is this right? Is this true? Does it line up with what I know? Can I get additional information to confirm what AI generates?
You know, Andres, it comes down to me to really getting everyone to understand some concepts in AI, right? That it's not querytive, it's generative, which means it's based on patterns.
Right.
And so identifying and understanding what we're expecting from AI and those concepts to me is one of the biggest issues with AI slop. If I am asking a querytive question and not understanding the model and the data that it's trained on and how it's trained to think, and most generative AI models just don't work for querytive type natures. And I don't, am I making up a word querytive? But
Maybe it's the next the next it word.
it's
Right,
just
hit
how
word.
I've been talking about it lately.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
generative AI is generative based on patterns in data.
yeah,
It's not querytive. Like maybe another way is deterministic versus probabilistic.
right.
Deterministic is like go find exactly this answer and this value, pluck it out of that database or that search, that binary Boolean search, right? But like probabilistic and generative is a totally different thing. So it's not that AI sucks or AI doesn't work. We have to understand how we're using it to avoid AI slop.
Yeah, and there are additional components that go into this. Like bias is a really important one. So we obviously use these models and systems that are based on data, and that's data that was gathered through the real world data, basically things that we have created as humans. And so there are these worldviews, there are these biases in the data, just because our world views and beliefs are encoded in language. So now these models perpetuate and reiterate these biases in there. So as a user, you need to be aware that there could be bias in the output that you generate. One example where I usually show this to participants in my workshops and trainings and to students that I teach is going to an image generator. For example, Gemini, or going into ChatGPT and say, create an image of a doctor and nurse. In most of the cases, the doctor ends up being ends up being male, and the nurse ends up being represented as a female. Now, we know that there are also female doctors and male nurses, but probably statistically, there are more male doctors and more female nurses. So you need to check the output. It doesn't have to be just the image generation, but the same applies to text or any other type of media that you create.
Yeah, that's where I think like business analysis, the field that I work in, has such a huge part in the bias and ethics questions about AI, that business analysts have such amazing knowledge of an enterprise context and how things connect, that they can really be that front role in developing the potential bias and then helping update prompts, embedded prompts, and instructions in agents to either look for or counter that, right?
Yeah. And you bring up a great point, right? This wouldn't be a LinkedIn Learning Instructor office hours if we also didn't talk about courses. So
Yes.
let me jump there real quick. Angela, you've been on the platform as a trainer and instructor for 10 years or something, if I saw that right?
Yeah, 10 or 11, something like that.
Yeah. What are your most recent courses focused on?
The most recent courses are focused, well, my most recent is the Agentic AI for Business Analysis, which focuses on how to do business analysis for agentic and enterprise AI integration.
Yeah.
And then I've had some course updates as well, where we're updating them for a more AI era, including a new one called Introduction to Business Analysis, which gives a fresh introduction to modern business analysis today, including an agentic world.
That's awesome. Fantastic. I've already taken some of your courses, and I really love the depth that you bring to the subject, and obviously the expertise, having worked in this field for so long. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Looks like you've got some great new ones too, and even some good translations happening.
yeah, exactly. I was just in Carpinteria, California at the end of August to record new courses. I'm super excited that one of them has already recently published, and it's called How AI Agents Augment Human Skills in the Workplace. And it's
Wow.
basically, right, it's basically all about how do you prevent or how do you stop yourself from creating AI work slop and more work for others. So hence the topic of today's session here as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, it trails into the into so much that both of us work on, you know, the individual, team, and enterprise use of AI, and where that slop can go on all levels if we're not careful.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I started noticing some of that behavior at the beginning of the year, early spring, where I was getting more and more communication or documents from business partners who said, "Hey, I created this first draft. Can you take a look at this?" And you start reading it, like, come on, it's not bad, but with a little more care, with 10, 15, 20 minutes or even more time and your own expertise, you could get this to a really, really good level. So fast forward 6 months, 7 months, and we're here in AI slop is the term that we now use, and starting to use, and it's becoming a real thing. And I think it's just going to accelerate as well. But one question that I have for you, I saw somebody on LinkedIn post this idea the other day about the topic, and I said, well, Workslop has always been there. You know, we've always had colleagues that are high performers, that are very diligent, that do great work, and we've always had team members who've taken a little more liberty on the deliverables and on the level of quality. Now it just levels the playing field, and you can more easily see who uses AI and up levels it, and who uses it and just sends it off. How does it resonate with you?
You know, it's funny, right before you ask that question, I'm thinking about software development in context, for example, and thinking about how if a development team doesn't do good unit testing And to meet the deadline, they just say it's done. They say they've done their unit testing.
Yeah.
And then it gets handed off, for example, to a business analyst for some integration end-to-end and UAT testing. And they get slop code even before the AI age, right? So they get slop code and it falls on the business analyst, and they're in this delicate political situation to call the slop code, or like, can you prove to me any testing was actually done? And all of a sudden the business analyst is in this position to call a delay on the project, or, you know, a really politically sticky situation. They don't want to throw anyone under the bus, yet it's stuck in their work effort. Right. And I think that's what you're describing, right? Is in order to meet a deadline, we push something out with AI and it's crap. Like, this happens in every process, software, business, right? Like, geez, how do we manage that?
Yeah, and you know, I've previously built and led teams of different sizes, and I'm now independent, and I help business leaders figure out what do I do with AI, from strategy to roadmap to literacy, and especially in the literacy component and leadership training, I've started to incorporate that more and more now, because as a leader, right, you've likely already set values by which you want the team to work and abide by. You already have a code of conduct in that sense, like what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what's acceptable work and work output, and what is not. Where do we set the bar, and how do we know whether we meet or exceed it, or if we remain below it? And to me, that just extends to agentic AI now as well, that as a leader, we need to say, hey, it doesn't matter how the work is created, by yourself, as a team, with AI, or with a team of AI agents going forward, you are responsible. You are accountable for the result, and you need to make sure that it's high quality. It's not just a matter of turning your productivity gain into somebody else's now productivity nightmare, having to sift through everything and correct it for you. And I think setting these clear boundaries and expectations is one of the first steps that you can already take today, because we know that there's a lot of shadow AI usage in organizations. I think 40% seems to be a good number for many of these findings, but 40% of professionals also said, hey, I use AI regularly in my work. So whether it's approved or they use it on corporate devices, personal devices, AI usage is happening. So as a leader, you need to set the expectation that it doesn't matter how the result is created, you are still responsible as an individual.
Yeah. But it's scary too, because that assumes that every person is doing the same tasks they were yesterday, but with AI. Yet, aren't we seeing some proliferation of transforming processes where some tasks no longer need to be done? But where I get really, really passionate about this is, how do you evaluate which tasks in a process can be combined using AI or removed? And this is where I think a lot of the missing thinking is in organizations, especially with agentic AI, and kind of back to that micro tasking conversation, right? Can we take the idea of a business process and parse it out again and get it down to a task level and evaluate, should this be done by AI? And what happens when probabilistic nature of outputs then proliferates through the process? Like, that's AI slop, but embedded into an agent. If it's in the wrong step and not evaluated correctly, doesn't have the right human in the loop processes built in. And I talked to some companies building agents, and I'm looking at it, I'm working with them, we're watching what they're doing, they're demoing this stuff to me in their build process, and I'm like, great, so where's your human in the loop, your evaluation? And they're like, huh? Like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. So I had a friend ask me the other day. He's a consultant, and he said, look, a lot of companies that I work with, a lot of leaders say we need to now do agentic AI. He said, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, because all they want to do is take their old process, put an agent in place of it, or in certain places, and keep running. It's like, that's not the point. That's not the purpose, right? It's not take the old stuff and make it go faster. It's sit down and actually rethink, are these the right steps? Do we need all of them? Which ones can we eliminate, consolidate, to your point? And then how can we divide the work between people that look at this strategically and with their lens of expertise, and agents that can do the repetitive things, but now can do more complex things at scale as well. And I think, to your point, that's where I see a lot of the dissonance and disconnect at the moment. And I think that will likely be a big barrier to achieving success and valuable outcomes and ROI with agentic AI. If you just do what you've always done, but you make it go faster,
100%.
you're leaving some
100%.
potential on the table. Yeah.
100%. And also the concept that kind of exponentially makes that a problem is the concept that some organizations, when they're looking at their team definitions for AI development, are looking at pairing a product and an engineer together in a small team. Yet I'm not sure the right analysis skills or robust enough analysis skills to do that work you're talking about then is present on the team.
Correct.
So for example, if we get into too much of the vibe coding and rapid prototyping, and we start using AI to do requirements analysis and mockups, and even help build AI agents. Oh my gosh, I'm terrified of the slop that's going to come out of this, and stuff will never go live, or if it does, it'll be a disaster, right? Because
that's the other part. Yes.
Don't have the analysis happening on exactly what you're talking about and I'm talking about. We both, I'm sure, talk about it in our courses of decomposing the tasks and really looking at what's the right candidate for AI and how to transform the process. Oh boy, it's just going to be a wild ride for organizations, right?
I think many people are concerned about what all of this does to their roles, what it does to jobs. First of all, I see a lot of people adopt the mindset of jobs are going to go away, okay, but please don't take mine. Right? That's one mentality or coping mechanism, and I think the other one, more on the positive and serious side, is I think there's a lot of work for many of us still for a long time, because those are the fundamental things that we need to do. Looking at our business process, looking at steps, where can we consolidate, where can we remove, where can we rethink how we do the business. And yes, some of that takes time, some of that takes investment, but at the end of the day, you also need to compare how does that relate to the ROI, the return on investment that we can achieve at the end of the day. Nothing's ever come from nothing. So
it's tricky. Like, Andres, do you see and as I work with teams more and talk about more and teach more, in some ways I'm saying, hey, we need to be more strategic. And I believe we do. But then at other times it's like, we need to be more detail oriented. But the detail oriented piece is a different type of detailed lens than before. And there's a dissonance there, right? Do we need to be more strategic, or do we need to be more detail oriented? Does your mind think about this a lot too?
So the visual that I have in front of my mind is how you arrange things in Word. If you have an object and how the text flows. To me, you're right in the center, and then there's the text above and there's the text below. Meaning we need both, in my opinion. Yes, we can start in the middle and say, okay, here's this new technology, AI, agentic AI, generative AI, what have you. And what can we do with it? So yes, we should try it out and we should pilot it, but then we need to elevate it and think, how can we use this strategically in our business function or in our quote to cash process, for example, or procure to pay, or hire to retire, and what have you, or even smaller sub processes. That's one thing. And the other one is, yes, we also need to sit down with the domain experts, with the process experts, process owners, and say, how does it actually work today? Not how do we intend that this works and how do we think that this works, but how does it actually work? Right? And that's where you already see where things get more difficult. Well, it usually works this way unless we get it from that customer and they send it in this format, and then Jane needs to call, and these sort of things, all the exceptions. But sitting down and seeing where are the breaking points in the process, where it flows optimally, that's the other side. So both strategic, how do we use this in our business function? What can this enable? But then also tactical, how does it actually work? Where can we use it?
So then, as I hear that, a lot of the questions that come up in my field are the balance of speed. Leaders want speed, 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 speed. And what you're describing is a really deep understanding of the current as is process. Yet we can't, there's just folks are not open to spending months defining the as is process. So it's all about this balance. Like, can we build the future and the as is in parallel? What are you seeing in terms of that?
I think that's a very thoughtful question, because it is indeed this balance that you need to strike in your business. You cannot just go off in your lab or dark room and come out with a big revamp 3 months later or 6 months later. You need to find these quick wins, these opportunities as you're going. And part of that to me means we need to enable our business users and our subject matter experts, first of all, with basic AI literacy. What is it? How does it work? What can you use it for? What are the challenges, risks, opportunities? So they warm up to this idea of using AI more and more regularly in their business. But so they can also start spotting opportunities. Oh, well, here's always something where I need to enter information, or I take this and I need to summarize it and then I send it to someone else. Well, now with the knowledge that AI can do part of that, I can reach out to my technology team or to the team that leads AI and say, hey, can you help me figure this out? I think we have an opportunity. We found some little nuggets, and then start from there. But I'm curious, what do you advise? What do you see from a business analysis point of view?
Yeah, I see things all over the place, right? We see teams and BAs that want to take a lot of time to define the current state process, but then leaders get impatient, like we have to move forward.
Yeah.
So I tend to work with a lot of teams to try and do both at the same time. So can we look at the as is, but also look at the future? And how do we design that in parallel, where we're looking at the as is and saying, okay, this is ripe for optimization. And like you said, instead of a whole big bang transformation, there is some road mapping we can do to say, all right, we're going to pilot this, experiment with this. If it works, we're going to plop it into the new process, which just has this small change.
Mm-hmm.
Learn from it, experiment more, hypothesize, do some planned experiments and hypotheses, and keep that balance of improving on the current state, but also what are the big transformations we can make. So we don't have to have that all figured out ahead of time. We can do a lot of learning and iterating as we go, but keeping both ideas in mind, iterative improvements and continuous improvements, along with transformational ones as we learn.
That sounds like a very sensible approach, because you really cannot afford to sit still when technology is advancing that quickly, when we still need to absorb it. We still need to make sense of it in a business and in a business context. So really this two-speed approach, basically think about what are you doing today and where can you optimize it, and then on the other hand, more transformational and more midterm or longer term. Now, Angela, we've already talked about the courses. I know you've been on LinkedIn for a long time as well. Folks, if you want to connect with us, putting up the QR code here. So take out your phone, scan it, or just follow us on LinkedIn. Personally, I write about how do you bring AI to your business and make sure that it's successful, from strategy, roadmap to literacy. I post on LinkedIn every day something thoughtful and original about the topic. And Angela, how about you? You're on LinkedIn, very present as well, right?
Yes, I also try to do daily posts on LinkedIn with tips for business analysts and business analysis in general, and how to make sure it's integrated into your organization.
Perfect. Yeah. So do connect with us. Reach out. Also reach out if you're looking for help on these topics, like how do I manage AI Workslop? How do I get my people to use AI but use it the right way? And how do I do that specifically for the business analysis, whereas I'm thinking about bringing agents more into the business?
Andreas, I think it's important too that if leaders out there are answering that question that you just brought up, how do I manage Workslop? I think it's important we talk about it as leaders. Like, it's okay to talk about this in your team meetings and your weekly meetings, because that balance of speed and slop and accountability and boundaries, I think that's a team discussion.
That's a really important point, right? Because if you start creating this community learning,
Yeah.
you also start normalizing that we use this kind of technology now. By the way, there was an interesting study that I think came out in May or so by Duke University, and they They worked with professionals and with leaders and surveyed them about their AI use, and more from a social sciences point of view. So professionals said, yes, I use AI, but I don't tell my peers and I don't tell my manager. And I said, why don't you tell your manager or your peers? Well, then they might think I'm lazy or I'm incompetent, or I just end up with more work now that I'm so much more productive. And that predates the AI Workslop discussion in Workslop term. Now, first of all, to me, that's super interesting that people might think, hey, others might perceive me as less competent or might perceive me as lazy if I use modern technology. So I think as a leader, you have a role there to play and empower your team to use it.
Yeah.
Now, if you add AI slop to the discussion, it kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So yes, yes, your team members will very likely perceive you as being lazy and incompetent because the output that you send on, if you don't, or if you're not diligent enough, looks like you're, not diligent in that sense. So just interesting facts and interesting research there from my point of view that kind of illustrates what's going on in organizations, high AI usage, but concern, but then also if you don't, give proper training and instructions, if you don't live it in your team, if you don't role model it, yeah, sure, that's what we see happen.
Yeah. It's just I keep thinking about how easy it is to be so wowed by the results we get. And personally, how do each of us find the right mental processes to catch ourselves in that awe moment and reset and balance back to wait a second. No. Right? What story am I trying to tell with this data, with this image, with this writing, with this answer? We have to be so much more clear with ourselves on the task that we're doing. And that's so much self-management at a different level than we're used to today.
Yeah. For me, part of it also is asking what is good enough? What does good enough look like?
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue if it's some generic, maybe even corporate blog type information where it's not assigned to you as a human, but it's the brand, right? You rather want to make sure that it aligns with your tone, with your brand guidelines, that the right keywords are in there. But it doesn't have to be super crafted in that sense, like something would need to be if somebody paid you a lot of money for it. Yes, we still want it to be accurate. We still want to make sure that it doesn't sound like AI slop and that it isn't sloppy. But to me, there's a different level of good enough, or summarizing meeting minutes, sending it out in an email. Here are the facts. Here's the recording if you want to listen to it again. But here are the 5 action items that we took, and here's who's responsible. I don't need to sit there and listen to this again or scribble down my notes and then put it in an email. It's good enough as long as it's factually accurate. Personally, I'm fine with it. But
Yeah.
if I say, hey, here's my opinion on something, it better comes from me, or it better be vetted and reviewed.
Or if it's a sensitive communication,
That
like
too.
emotionally sensitive,
Yes.
I've found myself like there are some I've iterated like 50, 60 times with AI.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, that's too assertive. Nope, that's not to the point enough. Nope, that's not soft enough. Like,
Yeah. Um,
it's,
remember early on when ChatGPT was starting to grow like weeds, people said, oh yeah, I wrote a commencement speech, or I wrote my daughter's 14th birthday speech, or we wrote the speech for Bob's retirement. It's like, why? No, you should be writing this, right? It's you and your emotions and your knowledge. I
yeah,
wouldn't want some software to write something that is about a personal connection. By the
no.
way, I think that's a terrible way to send somebody off in retirement, or to retirement, or off to college or something.
No, I agree. Again, it's just owning well, you and I have done a lot of speaking and writing before. So it
That too. Yeah.
we have, a lot of experience and sense of storytelling and that's the risk, right? Is if we're not critically thinking about the story and the emotional undertone of it, the key messages, I mean, that's where they're saying communication is such a big skill in the age of AI.
Yeah.
And so blending the use of AI with communication skills and the critical thinking of what am I trying to communicate? Why? Who's my audience? What's the right tone? What's the right level of detail? How do I craft a story? And AI doesn't do those things.
No, and I think a lot of times not well, or you need to spend a lot of time crafting and optimizing the prompt and giving it context and giving it more context and the like.
Yeah.
So again, you might be spending more time tweaking it to get it to a point where it's good or good enough, then it's actually worth it. To me, the other part that plays into this is CEOs standing on stage or sending out memos semi-publicly, or they get leaked or shared intentionally, saying we want to be an AI company, an AI first company. Everybody needs to do AI or else, right? What do you mean or else? We'll fire you and replace you with AI? Well, great motivation for learning AI here. Thank you. So what's the point? Yes, every company should have a little more urgency in thinking about the topic, exploring it, implementing it, for sure. But I sometimes question the approach and the communication style in which that message gets cascaded down, because then I'm assuming, if I put myself into that role of employees at those companies, you're sitting there and you're wondering, well, okay, how do I do this? What tool can I even use? And sure, I use it to write my emails, and I tell my boss that I've used AI, so we meet our KPI. And what do we create? Workslop. So are we really that much more efficient and that much more productive? Or are we just meeting a KPI that we're an AI first company?
Yeah, there's a lot of that happening. But we also are seeing some job shifts and organizational reorgs around the concept of, I'm not sure this group of people in my org are going to lean into the AI era, right? So those questions are happening. I think the question you're bringing up, Andreas, is, are we using AI to check a box and prove we're using it? Or are we learning it and showing we can elevate ourselves and our skills with it? And that's, to me, the biggest thing, is not just that we're using it, but are you going through the transformation process within yourself?
I like that. In yourself. I think that's an important addition. In many of the trainings that I give also for leaders, I get questions like, so can you show me a framework? Can you give me the shortcut? Can you give me the cheat sheet for how I use agents, GPTs, and so on? It's like, yeah, there are some, but your process looks different from mine. It's more about learning how to ride a bike than reading about it, watching movies, looking at pictures about bikes. You won't be as proficient in riding a bike as if you actually get on and you start to pedal and you start to find your balance. It's the same thing here.
Yeah.
Same for your team members, same for your organization.
Yes, right. How many of us, it's so easy to think, oh, if I take a class, I know it, or become an expert. Nope, we become skilled by doing. A class can accelerate your doing process and learning process, and hey, we're all on here like, hey, we're instructors, take our classes, but at the same time, it's like the first little bit that will help you get faster at the doing part of learning. We still have to do, perform, and practice.
Exactly. But since you brought up classes, talk a little bit more briefly about your classes for business analysts here on LinkedIn Learning.
Yeah, the focus on business analysis for my courses is really about business analysis as a profession and deep business analysis. Everybody does business analysis in a lot of different roles and fields, but the depth of the profession of business analysis is just a complexity level that's different, and analyzing for complexity. So complex projects where data, workflow, user experience, business rules, and technology all come together,
Right.
and really analyzing those intricacies, modeling them, making sure that changes we make do not have ripple impacts that are negative, but instead positive.
That deeply resonates with me, because from my own experience, having led projects in and around AI, a lot of times it's a technology first driven approach. Mm-hmm. Hey, we have a new technology, let's figure out what we can do with it, right? And then at some point, maybe we start asking, what do you think we can save? What do you think, how much money we can make if we use this in certain parts of the business? So to your point, right, we actually need to start a lot earlier in the process and think about what is the business value, what is the business problem to begin with that we're trying to solve. So I think business analysis and business analysts are critical here especially in this phase of that big transformation.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's all about how can you as a leader bring AI and agentic AI into your business? How do you lead through that disruption when people are concerned and afraid that, hey, my job might be changing, or maybe I'm training my replacement here. How do you deal with that? And where do you find opportunities on one hand to bring in more technology where it makes sense, but on the other hand, augment people in your business, in your workplace, to help them be the best selves that they can and excel at the tasks that they do without creating Workslop?
Sounds like we have a great playlist for the group between the two of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll also see it in the description here of our event if you want to check out the individual courses here. Like I said, Angela has a whole library of them that she's created over the last 10 years. I've created a number of them over the last 2 years here with LinkedIn Learning. Also, again, just to bring that up, follow us for daily updates on how do you bring AI to your business, what matters if you're a business analyst in this new space of AI. And between that, you should be very, very well covered.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Angela, it's been a pleasure having you on this office hour today. I think we covered a lot of ground. This was fully unscripted, so I'm super excited to see where we took the conversation as we went along. And I hope you enjoyed it too in the audience.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And yeah, this has been super fun. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.